Okay. Good evening, everyone, and good evening, viewers out there. Thank you once again for joining us this week on Get to Help You Live. As usual, we are here once again to discuss a very important topic. But today, we are privileged to have three professionals with us to discuss the topic child abuse. We always hear about child abuse, but I think there is more to it than people being beaten up or anything. So we are lucky to have this a lady and then two gentlemen here to educate us on this topic. Good evening, our guests, our lady, and then our two gentlemen. Good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Christina.
Evening, Christine.
Good evening.
Thank you so much. I'll give you the opportunity to introduce yourself one at a time, and then we move on to the topic, if it's okay. Can we start with the lady first, if it's okay?
So, my name is Rejoice Seiku. I'm a children's social worker, child protection.
Okay, and then to William, if it's okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is William Vanderpoy. I'm an early years teacher, and I'm also a disabilities rights advocate with specialism for autism.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm Isaac Banier. I'm consultant social worker, also in children's services.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really grateful for your time. Viewers out there, when you get on here, can you please share and invite others to come on and listen to this? We are here to discuss on the topic child abuse. I don't know who will take the first question, but when we talk about child abuse, Mr. Bani, what is child abuse?
Well, in simple terms, we say child abuse when we are talking about when a child is intentionally abused by an adult or a child. That is the broad term of child abuse. And there are various forms of child abuse. But in brief terms, child abuse is when a child is abused intentionally by an adult or another child. But in practice, there are instances that
Okay.
the abuser may not know that what they are doing is actually child abuse, but it still comes under child abuse as long as the impact is having adverse effects on the child to qualify as a child abuse.
Okay. So, what are the different kinds of child abuse we have? Maybe we need to know the different kinds, and then maybe we talk about them on the various topics.
There are several forms of abuse, but broadly we divide them into four main categories, and these categories are physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. So these are the four main types of abuse. But if you look at individual types of abuse, then you can put them under one of these. But something like emotional abuse, it cuts across all the other forms of abuse. For instance, if you are physically abusing a child, though the actual act is in physical form, it also has emotional impact on the child.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
As Mr. Vanderpoy, as an early years teacher, how do you know a child is being abused? You know, you do with kids in school. How do you know? What are some of the signs you see?
Well, there are various signs that indicate that a child might be at risk of an abuse or might be in the process of being abused, one of the telltale signs is that there's going to be a drastic change in behavior on the part of the child. The child might be a normal, bubbly child, friendly child, but all of a sudden they might become very withdrawn. They might also show aggression. They might have sexualized behavior if they've been sexually abused. There might be instances of bedwetting, nightmares. If they've been physically abused, they might have scars all over their bodies, on their arms, on their limbs, faces, on their necks. And most of the time, these scars are not at the usual place where scars are expected to be when children are playing, like on the knees, on the elbows, but rather on the forearms. You might see things like cigarette burns, even to the extent of them having broken bones. And most of the time, the perpetrators try to cover up these signs or these scars by causing them to wear long-sleeved clothing, even when it's quite hot. So these are some of the telltale signs that there must be something wrong going on.
Okay. And Mrs. Eseku, what else do you have on top of this as a mother and then a social worker? What else do you have? Or
Right. So as Mr. Van der Poel clearly stated, those are some of the signs of abuse, but there are other forms as well. Like you can actually see a child, when you see a child being unconfident, lack self-esteem, struggle to control their emotions, have difficulties maintaining relationship, act in a way that is so inappropriate, age appropriate.
yeah.
Those are all signs of abuse.
Okay. So what happens if um someone sees this? What happens when you see a child being abused? What do you do as an individual? What do you do?
When you see a child being abused, you need to report to either the police or the social services if you have the safeguarding contact number. You can report straight to social services.
Okay.
But in the first instance, you have to report it to the police. The police will attend to the child, and then they will make a referral to social services. The same thing applies to school. We have safeguarding leads in all various schools. So if a child is being abused and it become a concern, the school can raise a concern and do a referral to social services, and then we follow up to go and check and see what is really going on. We go to investigate and find out what is really going on. So it's every individual's
Okay. So
responsibility to report abuse of any forms to the police, either to the police or to social services, whichever is best. But the first instance, you need to report it. You need to bring it to the attention of professionals.
okay, okay. So we said abuse physically or emotionally. How do we know what kinds of disciplines are okay for children? Mr. Bani, if you could come in, please.
Sorry, your question again.
I said we are talking about physical, emotional, and then other abuse. How do we know the kinds of disciplines that are okay for children?
Oh, okay. Well, in UK, parents are allowed to discipline their children by using some minimal physical chastisement. The law allows that. And what they use to gauge that minima is that when you use your hand to say smack your child and you don't leave any mark there, then it is acceptable. But anytime that you smack a child and you leave some mark, then you've gone beyond what is expected. And as we may all agree, it's difficult for you to know that if I hit that hard or that minor hit, it will leave a mark or not. So, as a professional, there are various ways of disciplining a child without using physical chastisement, or what we call beating up
Yeah.
your child in a way of disciplining a child, because you may end up accidentally hurting the child. So I will not encourage using physical chastisement, and unfortunately, some even use implements. And in UK, the law does not allow that at all. As soon as you use
Yeah.
something to discipline a child, then you've gone beyond disciplining a child. It doesn't matter whether you are using your sandals, you are using a cane, or even if you are using a pillow. As long as you are using, it will be deemed as you are using an implement, and that is straight criminal act,
Yeah.
and it's not allowed. Yeah. So that is the physical bit. But like I said previously, there's emotional aspect to
I don't
that.
know who would take it. He said he's okay. Uh,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was talking about the emotional abuse also, and if we are talking about emotional abuse, that one is
it's
also
fine.
very broad.
You go. Yeah.
So when you are physically disciplining or beating up your child, it has emotional implication on your child, and when you are also being verbally abusive to a child, that also has emotional implication. Or when you put a fear in children, sometimes some parents will take a cane, or even some will take a knife and threaten the child that I will beat
Yeah.
you, or I will do this to you with that weapon. The
Wow.
fear that you are putting into the child is form of emotional abuse. There are times that adults, parents, brothers, or whatever, we also destroy things that we know children cherish. For instance, if you know a child has, particular affection to a teddy or a toy, and you break the toy or throw it away, it has emotional implication on the child. It can also be this common thing that goes on in many homes, domestic violence between parents. So if, say, a father is beating the
Yeah.
mother and the children are witnessing, you are exposing your children to emotional abuse, or you are emotionally abusing their children by them witnessing what you are doing to their mother. Um, some argue that, oh, it
Okay.
happened when the children were in a different room. They did not physically see what happened. But no, when the children hear, loved one, either their mom or dad, crying next door and not knowing what is going on, it has emotional impact on them. Or they wake up in the morning and see their mom or dad with bruises and swollen eye and everything. So all those things are part of emotional abuse.
Okay. There's a question from one of our viewers. I think he's in Ghana. He says, when you take your children to farm, let's say during vacation, is it child labor or not?
I think it depends on what you take the child to the farm to do. It depends on what the reason why you took the child to the farm to do. What task have you
Okay, because
assigned the child to do?
you know, some parents, some parents would say, "Oh, they are spoiled because they were born in UK. They are spoiled children, so let me take you to Africa and then to farm, just to teach them some hard work or something. How do you take that?
I a child that way with the motive that the child should learn something, some sort of hard way or punishment is counted as a child abuse. If you need to teach your child something, I think it should be based on a clear conscience. Like I'm doing this for you to learn some
Mm-hmm.
lessons, but not to um, use that as a method to punish the child. The motive behind it is what classify it as an abuse or not.
Okay. Okay. Um, we have what? Can you tell me the difference between child abuse and neglect?
Right.
Can I answer that question? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. I would say that neglect is part of child abuse. It is a subset of child abuse. Neglect is normally seen in the appearance of the child. Um, do they turn up at school with unkempt hair? Do they turn up without any food? Look at their clothes. Are you looking after them? That's how we get to know where a child is neglected or not. Do you take them to a hospital when they are sick?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, as part of neglect, we also look at the disabilities. If they are presenting signs of a disability, for example, and you're not acting upon it, you are not, for example, taking them to hospital to get assessed for it, it can be constituted as neglect as well. So I would say neglect is part of abuse.
Well, what I
Okay.
will add to
And
that is
so
that
yeah,
I wanted to add something small to that. We have
yeah,
we
before
have we have various form of neglect also.
Neglect.
Like my brother had just said, the neglect can be physical neglect. That is when you are
yeah,
not giving them um, clothing, food, and appropriate, shelter.
Shelter,
That can be physical neglect, and there can be also medical neglect,
medical
like you don't take
neglect,
your child to hospital, or if you
or the
take the child to
dentist.
hospital and they give you medication, you don't make sure that the child takes the medication. That can be medical neglect, and you can also neglect your child emotionally by not showing love and affection to that child. You don't say positive things to the child to help improve their self-esteem and their emotional health. That one can also be um, neglect. And one thing that sometimes also affect children is when you have um, say 2 or 3 children and you treat them unequally. So if you look at one child, what you are doing for that child per se may
mm-hmm.
not be bad, but if you compare to the other sibling, then what you are doing is neglect. If a parent has 3 children and on their birthday, the way she celebrates the birthday for them, one may feel neglected by maybe getting only one present, whilst the other siblings get 5 or 4. But maybe if you look at it in isolation and you say that, oh, on your birthday, your mom gave you, or your dad or parents gave you a present, that one alone may not be deemed as
Yeah,
neglect. But if you compare that to what is happening to the other siblings, then you will see that um, that child is not being treated, equally or equitably as compared to the other siblings, and that can also be deemed as emotional neglect.
Neglect.
okay. So there's a question. If you have a child who is very difficult to handle, like how, like as professionals, how do you deal with them? How do you deal with those kids?
I would say that from a teacher's point of view, one, seek help. Secondly, a behavior is normally a cry for help. It means that there's something wrong with the child's environment. It's not that the child is just being naughty, but there's something that is wrong that needs to be corrected. Not necessarily on the child, but in their environment. So it's best for us to seek help, to find a plan, sit together, and come up with a plan that will help us to assist the child's behavior.
Is
And
there
what I
anything else?
was what I also add to that is that we normally use two kind of ways of trying to instill good behavior. Either we discipline children or we reward children. And more often, we tend to focus on trying to discipline children for doing something that we don't want them to do. So if you are trying to discipline your child and it's not working, I would advise that we focus on motivating children to come up with good behavior. And actually, that is my preferred option instead of disciplining children, because if your child knows that if they do this, they get this reward, because they want reward, they are more likely to do the good things that you want. Then you reward them. The reward can be anything. Sometimes, depending upon the age of the child, you just need to praise them. Sometimes we give them stickers and they're happy with it. you know and if they are growing, then you modify the reward that you give to them. So reward works a lot, but like my colleague said, there are some children who may have underlying health issue, ADHD or whatever. So you may want them to sit quiet and watch
Yeah.
TV, but they have this underlying health issue that they cannot stay still for 5 minutes. So if you don't know that and address it from that perspective, and you are using cane or even reward to let them sit, that one it has health implications. So you need to seek help, or you need to request for an assessment to really know that what you are dealing with is purely parenting issue, but not any medical issue underlying it.
Okay. Do you think I want this questions? You know, some kids are very stubborn, and if you have, you just said if you have different kids, if you have like two, three kids, and you reward one person, and then you leave that person, sometimes it's a strategy for them to change. Do you think that that can also be counted as an abuse? If you are trying to show him that no, if you don't change, I'm not doing this, and then you make sure you do this for the other siblings. Do you think it's also an abuse?
Yeah, I think it's classified as emotional abuse and neglect, because as parents we need to learn to understand our children better. And if you think the child has got some behavior issues, as Isaac said, there are so many services that support children with such behaviors. And that is what, as a parent, you should be looking forward to, and not to treat the child, you know, different from the other. Because the experience that that child will have from
Yeah.
you as a mother will last that child forever. I mean, to take that child into adulthood, and he or she will never forget that experience.
Yeah.
That can cause so many conflicts between you and your child's relationship. So it's
Yeah.
best that you seek advice or you seek support from professionals. By
Yeah.
doing so, you can start from school. You can work with you can work with school for the best outcome for the child, instead of neglecting the child's needs.
Okay. So
And and and
there's
and, and
this
what I,
as
what I will add to
professionals.
that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Go
No,
on.
what
No,
what I
it's fine.
was
Go on.
what I want to add to that is, in terms of rewarding your children, I need to make this caveat there that you cannot reward your children with basic things like food and say that if you don't do this, you are not eating. Okay, so food is not
Give you food, yeah.
things that you want them to put up good behavior before you give them food. That one, whether they are naughty or not, you have to give them. So if you starve your child because the child is not listening to you, that is straight away an abuse. I'm talking about other gifts that a child can do without, like buying an additional toy for a child or something. That is the kind of motivation that I'm talking about here. Yeah.
Okay. So we know that in UK here that we are bound by laws on our children coming from our African backgrounds. Um, how do you see the way we discipline those children back home? Some of us were brought up with like they cane us, they use cane and other stuff to like they smack you with canes and other stuff. How do you advise like in this modern age? I know it's people will say, oh, it's those days, but in this modern age, I'm sure it's still going on. What advices would you give to our people out there on how to manage the children and how to deal with them or discipline them?
I would say that corporal punishment is never okay. I was beaten up as a child in school, at home, everywhere. And now, whenever I did something wrong and I was beaten, children are wise, I found a way of doing the same thing without getting caught. I think my parents and my teachers would have been wiser if they had sat me down to tell me the adverse consequences of my actions rather than just punishing me for it. In that way, I would have understood that it is wrong for me to do
Okay.
X, Y, and Z rather than just beating me. Also, some of the times we beat our children in school because they are not performing well, but they might have an underlying condition. Somebody might not be able to read like the rest of the class because they might have dyslexia. Someone might not be that good at maths because they might have dyscalculia. Someone might not be that good at PE because they might have something called dyspraxia. For example, I was beaten in secondary school because I couldn't march. I remember we were trying to train for the march pass right in the middle of the playground, and I wasn't marching that well. So at the long run, I was called out, beaten in public, and sent away to a dormitory. Later on, years later on, that I got to know that I was autistic. Not only that, but I also autism comes with so many conditions called comorbid conditions. One of which is dyspraxia. That explains why I've been running and knocking my head against the wall when I was a little boy. So I was caned for something that was absolutely no fault of mine. It's a bit like the death penalty in other countries. It is never
Yeah,
okay. It is wrong. And the consequences are almost irreversible. It's a form of abuse.
yeah,
So it needs to be stopped. We need to find other ways of correcting. There are so many other ways of correcting um, wrong behavior, but physical punishment is tantamount to torture. It should not be part of it, irrespective of how much you might disagree with me. I know many people back home might disagree with me on that, but it is what it is.
yeah, yeah. Because we see so many young children um, going about selling water and stuff on the streets late in the night. They walk late in the night and around, and it's a bit heartbreaking when you see them. But because we are here, we know we are bound by laws. But sometimes when we go back home, we don't
Mm,
care when we see them. You understand what I'm saying? So when you
exactly.
see someone being abused, what do you do as an individual? What do you do?
Okay.
Do you mean back home or over here?
No, over here, over here.
Okay, all right. I'll let Brother Isaac.
Yeah. What I would say is that if we go back to look at signs of um, abuse, and also if
Abuse.
you look at
Yeah.
the effect of being abuse as a child, um, research has shown that if a child is physically abused, chances are that when that child grows up, that child will normalize that behavior when they become a parent. He or she will also use physical
Yeah.
chastisement as a way of disciplining the child. If a child is exposed to, say, father beating mother in their relationship, that child will see it as a normal relationship. So if the child is female and she grows up and is in abusive relationship, she sees it as normal. Men beat their wives or girlfriends, so we take it like that. So sometimes
Yeah.
that is also the way we parent our children. When your parents use cane on you
Yeah.
and you've turned out to be somebody that you believe it has shaped you well, that is your psyche that
Yeah.
physical chastisement is okay. So if my parents beat me up, then I have the right to also um, beat my children. Or if I witness my daddy beating my mommy, why can't I beat my girlfriend or wife? So if you're a professional and you are working with
Yeah.
such families, taking your time to get better understanding of where this person is coming from helps the intervention that you give to the person. Because telling them that what you are doing is abuse will not really change things. You have to do proper intervention with
Yeah.
them and go through the sequencing for them to appreciate that actually my thinking and everything that I'm doing now is photocopy of what I learned from my parents, which may not be necessarily um, the right thing or the best way. And then you give them the other alternatives because it's not enough to say that when your child is naughty, don't discipline them or don't beat them. In terms of discipline, professionals, we want parents to discipline their children, but we don't want them to abuse them. But we cannot just say don't abuse them, discipline them, and we leave them like that. Give them the tools. What are the various options for
Yeah.
disciplining children? At what age can you use this or that? So when you give them those options, then they can try it and see what one will work for them. Because with children and even adults, it's not all disciplinary measures that will work for every child. This method will work for this child, and the other method will work for the other child. So when parents have the various disciplinary strategies, then they will try them and use them appropriately or when required.
Okay. So this question, let me ask, as if you see a child who is being abused, or who has scars or something, who do you approach first? Do you approach the parent or the the professional, the social services, or the teacher? Because sometimes
The
we will
child,
want
the,
to do it unanimously. We don't want.
if you
Yeah, go on,
see an
please.
abuse, if you see a child being physically abused, if the child is a school-going child, I think the best thing is to raise that concern with the police if you can, or report it to the school. That is, there's safeguarding leads in all the schools. Report it to the safeguarding lead at school. You can actually, if you don't want your name to be mentioned, you can do anonymous referral. You can let the school know that you don't want your name to be mentioned, but this is what you've seen with this child. Explain what you have seen and how the child was being abused. You can also report it to the police directly if you want, and you can also report it to social services directly. So, any professionals that you think is with the law, you can report to that professional, and the professional will carry it over.
Yeah.
So it's everybody's duty to make sure that children are safe, and it is okay if you raise concern. regards to any physical abuse with any professional.
Okay. I have this question. What if in the school you have kids in one class and there's this one particular child who is troublesome, but later you found out they have this underlying issues with them. But sometimes they take blades, scissors, and then they start cutting their friend's stuff. You've reported it to the school and nothing is being done. How do you go further to make sure that all the other kids who are with him are safe?
From the point of view of an
Okay, yeah.
educationalist, we will not normally allow the children to bring in sharp objects unless maybe it's the normal scissors they use in school. In that case, there's always a disciplinary procedure to deal with disruptive behavior in class. So if the mom is concerned that there's a child in the class that is being disruptive or acting dangerously, we'll always address it. If the teachers are not doing anything, there's always a procedure to escalate it, and that procedure varies from setting to setting, from schools to school, and it's always found in the policies of the school.
Yeah, so in this case, if the school is not doing anything, what is the next step for you to do? Um, if our social services will answer us this question.
Well,
So,
Rejoice, go on.
okay. So, from what I'm hearing from Christine, she's concerned that there is a child in the school whose behavior is unacceptable, and the school, this has been reported to the school so many times, and nothing is being done to correct this behavior. Now, she's a
Yeah,
concerned mother, and she wants to know if whether, as an individual, she can raise the concern with any other professionals and something can be done about it. Yes, as a concerned citizen,
yeah,
you can actually do that, but you
yeah,
have to also bear in mind that this is somebody's privacy you are talking about. Okay, this child has got this
yeah,
child and the parent have got their own privacy, and you need to respect that. But as I said, if you don't want your name to be
yeah,
mentioned, you can actually do a referral to social services that this has been going on. The school bear witness. They can actually, you know, uh, bear witness that this has been reported so many times and nothing has been done. This is the
going on.
behavior this child is exhibiting. He's to the extent that a child is being kept in the process, nothing has been done about it. But you are concerned citizen, and you want to find out if something can be done about it. And as social services and as children's social services, they will go and then raise the concern with the parent that we had an anonymous referral, and this is what the referral states. We will cross-check with the school if there
Okay,
has been any incident or there has been any reported cases, if there has been any concern about this particular child, and if there is, okay, if our investigation proves that there is actually something like that going on, we will, support the parent for the child to get help. So
okay,
the fact that you are a concerned citizen, you're a parent, you don't want this child to go unattended in the process. I think it's okay if you take that due diligence to report, and then due process is being
yeah,
taken to make sure that that child and other children are safe.
What I will add to
okay,
Rejoice's contribution is that sometimes when children are presenting with challenging behaviors in school, the schools or the teachers
yeah,
are usually aware that this particular student or pupil is presenting with challenging behavior. And if it is
yeah,
normal behavior thing. They try to use various strategies to manage the behavior. But sometimes that child will be assessed and decide whether the child can fit in mainstream, or that particular child who is presenting with challenging behavior needs to go to maybe special school, where maybe the class size is small
Yeah.
or something of that sort. And what I would advise parents who may have children at that school should continue reporting their concerns to the school. The schools will log it anytime a parent makes complaint, and particularly if they are mentioning a particular child. Because when the psychologists are doing the assessment, they also take that into consideration to see how parents are complaining about this particular student's behavior. Because you may say that, oh, this child present with challenging behavior in school. It doesn't paint the whole picture. But if, say, different parents and within academic year or term, there have been 20 reported incidents about
Yeah.
parents about different forms of behavior. And also, if it is they're thinking that the school is actually not doing anything about it, you can escalate your complaint, to a higher level, that you've mentioned this, and the school is not doing anything about it, you know. And that can also help for the school to act and act appropriately.
Our time is, we are almost running out of time. I would want each of you to wrap up and give us any advice on what to do, on how to protect our children, and then also what. Just give us a wrap up of everything on how to treat them, their behavior, and then yeah, everything. I'll start with Mr. Vanderpoy. It's okay. As a
All right, with
teacher,
me, I'll say that, yeah, from a teacher's point of view, I'll say that the way we speak to our children and interact with them becomes their internal working model. By internal working model, I mean the cognitive framework comprising of the mental representations for understanding the world and the others, and even to understand themselves, which means that the way we speak to them reflects on how they're going to relate with others in the future. For example, this is very crucial because if the child's relationship with the parent is filled with negativity, negative affirmations, and microaggressions, this will become encrusted, embedded, and inculcated in their psyche and in their subconscious, and it will become their inner voice, internal working model. And this will determine future relationships, and they will tend to gravitate towards negative relationships in future. We often hear people saying that I've married my father or I've married my mother, that the person I'm moving with is just a little bit like my parent. They talk like my parents and other things like that. You might disagree with me again, but whether you like it or not, people end up marrying a partner who's very, very similar to the way their parents treated them. Why is that? It's because we are pre-programmed in our early years in our upbringing to accept what was being thrown to us. And empirical observation has shown that many people who were physically abused as children go on to be abused as adults, as Brother Isaac was saying. When you teach a child that it's okay to be hit, when you do something wrong, they'll grow up to one, become an abuser, or two, become a perpetrator or a victim again. It's the same with sexual abuse as well. If you look at people who are being caught for pedophilia, what they always say is that I was abused as a child. So this becomes a vicious circle. So the way we treat our children comes back to how they treat others as adults, and it determines their relationships. That's all what I've got to say.
okay. And Joyce, can you wrap up and give us an advice or something?
Yeah, so as a children's social worker, I would say that abuse is real, and abuse goes a long way to impact children's ability to function as adults. It impacts their development, emotionally, psychologically, and everything, every aspect of their lives. So as parents, we should be very careful how we treat our children. The words we use on our children also have a long impact on them. And these children grow up and continue the cycle. It becomes like a vicious cycle. They also treat their children like that because that is what they know, that is what they've learned, that is what they thought is being done. So, as much as we can, we know that in this country, everybody goes through so much pressure trying to bring up children the right way, and then to also make sure that they put food on the table for them. And sometimes the parent become agitated and frustrated with all this pressure, going on, and they tend to use languages that are not helpful on children. So I will suggest and I will advise that parents be careful of the words that they use on their children, and how they react, to children's behavior, because it has a very long impact, on children as they grow, as they become adults.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Okay. Um, the little dimension that I'll add to what my colleagues have said is when we are talking about child abuse, we are not only referring to parents abusing their children. Um,
Yeah.
if you talk about abuse like sexual abuse, sometimes it comes from neighbors and other family members who may sexually abuse our children that we may not be aware. With current use of internet and computer games, lots of children are going through cyber bullying and actual bullying from school. So, as a parent, you may do everything that you need to do for your child, but maybe at the blind side, your child is experiencing abuse, either from a colleague or a friend that they visit or whatever. But the impact of child abuse is the same, whether the child was abused by the father or the mother or a stranger, the impact is the same. So, what I would say is that as parents, it's not enough to say that I don't physically chastise my children or I don't abuse them. We need to be extra vigilant and careful and build positive relationship with them so that our children can trust us and share anything with us. Because if you look at grooming and sexual abuse, people who do that actually groom our
Yeah.
children to make them believe that they actually love them, but it's not love. They are just abusing them. And in that
Yeah.
case, if you don't have positive relationship with your child, they will not disclose to you. Lots of parents don't even know that their children take drugs, but they do. And for me, building positive relationship with your child and also being extra vigilant so that when William talked about signs of abuse, you can even see that your child is exhibiting those signs at home and pick it up and seek for help for your child as early as possible.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our time is almost up. I wish we have yet another more time to discuss this, but
yeah,
it's
what
the
I would
time will
say,
not permit
Christine, is
us.
that
So we can. Yeah.
what I would
Yes,
say
go
is that
on, please.
Christine, what I wanted to say is that when you talk abuse is a very broad subject. Okay, there are
Yeah.
so many forms of it, and we happens to, in fact, I could say that we touch based on the emotional abuse, physical abuse, and all that, but we didn't go into details because abuse is very broad. There is a lot to it than what we
Rod. Yeah.
have actually discussed here today.
Yeah. 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 I can see that. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we'll find another time and then go into details with more of the topic under the abuse then. So on this note, I'd like to say thank you very much. Um, Auntie Rejoice, Mr. William, and then Uncle Isaac. Thank you so much for your time and then for educating us. And I hope most of us out there, parents, not just parents, but adults with children, and then adults who cares for children, we've learned a lot from this evening's topic. And thank you also, viewers out there, for watching us. Next week, same time, we'll bring you yet another topic on Yes to Healthy Life. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you
You're
and
welcome.
goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
Well,
much.
Bye.
thank you too.